All right, today we are tackling one of the most explosive and, frankly, consequential stories in all of world history, the absolutely incredible rise of the Arab Caliphate. And it really all boils down to this one question. Think about it. In less than 100 years, a people from what was considered the margins of the world created a massive empire that stretched all the way from Spain to India. So, how on earth did that happen? To even begin to answer that, we've got to rewind to the beginning, to a world that was just primed for a revolution. Okay, so let's set the scene. Picture 7th century Arabia. This is not a country. It's a complete patchwork, a peninsula just fragmented by everything. Geography, tribes, culture. It was basically a pressure cooker, with immense forces building up from both the inside and the outside, making it the perfect incubator for a truly radical new idea. To really get this world, you have to understand just how deep the divisions ran. The people there saw themselves as two completely distinct groups. You had the Bedouins up in the north and the center. These were your nomadic warriors, tough as nails, who valued freedom more than anything. And then down south, you had the Himyarites, settled farmers, traders, the descendants of old crumbling kingdoms. And these weren't just, different jobs. In their own minds, they were practically different nations sharing the same piece of land.
And this divided society was cracking at the seams. I mean, you had nonstop tribal warfare. The old kingdoms in the south were falling apart. You had super rich merchants creating all sorts of social tensions. The massive Sasanian Empire in Iran was always looming as a threat. And maybe most importantly, the old polytheistic religions. They just weren't cutting it anymore. They weren't providing real answers. Yeah, something had to give.
And that's something that broke through. Well, it wasn't an army or a new king. It was an idea, a powerful unifying idea that had an answer for almost every single one of those pressures we just talked about. This was the crucial first step in changing Arabia forever. At the heart of this idea, of course, was the Prophet Muhammad. And what's just staggering is the speed of it all. I mean, look at this timeline. In 622, you have the Hijra, the migration to Medina, that basically kicks the whole thing off. A mere 8 years later, in 630, boom, Mecca itself accepts his leadership. And when he dies just 2 years after that, the movement he started is already the dominant force in all of Arabia. So what was so revolutionary about this idea? Well, Islam, which means submission to God, offered a completely new foundation for society. It was called the Ummah, a single community of believers. And this was huge, because all of a sudden, your main loyalty wasn't to your family or your tribe, it was to God and to all your fellow Muslims. It was the ideological superglue that Arabia was so desperately missing. But here's the thing about solving a huge problem like disunity. That solution almost always creates a new set of challenges. Muhammad had left behind this powerful, unified state, but now, who was going to lead it? And how in the world were they supposed to manage the insane expansion that was about to be unleashed? Well, this brings us to the first 4 successors, or caliphs, known as the rightly guided. First up was Abu Bakr, and he did the hard work of getting all the tribes officially under the banner of Islam. But then came Omar, and things just went into overdrive. I mean, in just 10 years, the caliphate conquered Syria, Egypt, and the entire Sasanian Empire in Iran. It is one of the most breathtaking military expansions in all of history. But as you can see, this incredible run of success, it ends in crisis over who gets to lead. And this is the great paradox of success, isn't it? The massive conquests brought unbelievable wealth and power, which suddenly made the question of who's in charge 1,000,000 times more important. It was a question that had kind of been simmering under the surface, but now, with the stakes so high, it just boiled over into open conflict. This conflict is what gives us the first great split within Islam. One group, the Shi'at Ali, which literally means the party of Ali, argued that leadership had to stay within the Prophet's family. It was their exclusive right. And let me be clear, this was not just some polite theological debate. This was a full-blown political crisis that spiraled into a civil war, and it created the division between what we now call Shia and Sunni Islam, a division that is still with us today. So, out of the chaos of that first civil war, a new power rises up, a dynasty that's going to solve the leadership crisis in a very different way, by ending the whole idea of elected caliphs and creating a hereditary empire. These were the Umayyads. And the change? Wow, it was like night and day. The rightly guided caliphs, remember, they were chosen from Muhammad's inner circle. They ruled from the simple city of Medina and were seen as a first among equals. The Umayyads?
They threw that whole model out. They made it a monarchy, passed down from father to son. They moved the capital to a new city, Damascus, built lavish palaces, and started to rule like absolute kings, adopting all the fancy trappings of the very empires they had just conquered. Under the Umayyads, the Caliphate very much became an Arab empire. Power was locked down by a Syrian Arab military aristocracy. Now they kept the conquests going, pushing deep into North Africa, Spain, and Central Asia, but this created yet another internal problem. Millions of non-Arabs, Persians, Berbers, you name it, converted to Islam. But these new converts, the Mawali, were treated like second-class citizens. They often had to pay taxes that were only meant for non-believers. And as you can imagine, this created some deep resentment.
And all that resentment, it became the fuel for the next big fire, another revolution. A new clan, the Abbasids, who were also related to the Prophet, by the way, they saw their opportunity. They harnessed all that anger from the non-Arab Muslims, the Shia, and anyone else fed up with the Umayyads, and they launched a bloody overthrow to once again completely remake the empire.
The Abbasids were really smart about this. They totally shifted the empire's whole identity. It wasn't an Arab empire anymore. It became an Islamic empire. The message was clear. This was a universal state where being a Muslim was way more important than being an Arab. And they moved the whole center of power eastward, embracing Persian ways of running a government, relying on a professional bureaucracy instead of just brute military force.
And nothing symbolized this massive change more than the founding of Baghdad. I mean, look at where they built it, right next to the old capital of the Persian Empire. The Abbasids were sending a crystal clear message. This was a new kind of caliphate, one that was plugged into the ancient, sophisticated traditions of Persian government.
So, how did they pull this off? Well, first, they rebranded the Caliph. He wasn't just some Arab king, he was the spiritual leader of all Sunni Muslims. Second, they built a real professional government, with specialized departments called diwans and a powerful chief minister, the vizier, to run the show. And third, they totally professionalized the army. They got rid of the old Arab tribal forces and created a paid standing army, which included elite Turkic slave soldiers known as the Mamluks.
So you see the journey, right? From a divided peninsula to a world-spanning empire. It's an amazing story about the power of an idea, but it's also about the unavoidable challenges that come with success. Every single solution we saw created a brand new problem, and those problems had consequences that echoed for centuries. The argument over succession, it leads to the Sunni-Shia split. The need for a loyal army, it leads to a reliance on slave soldiers. It all leaves you with one big final thought, doesn't it? The Caliphate did unify millions of people, but the internal cracks that formed along the way ended up shaping our world for centuries to come. So what is the true price of empire?